support on this. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Wayne Friedman, our West Coast editor, to get this going with the power. I'll turn it to Joe, and Joe, I guess you can turn it over to Wayne.
Okay, I'm turning it over to Wayne.
Okay, all right, it sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, John. Yes, it's been a busy period for everyone here. So a year ago, at this time of year, we would have been talking about the upfront marketplace for the coming TV season in the past tense, analyzing the market, analyzing pricing and volume. Now we can only look forward, a lot more questions. And can we imagine, to Joe's point, that this year, the upfront marketplace will result in some real groundbreaking disruption, more so than the financial crisis a decade ago? Well, you know, the betting would be absolutely. Here's what's likely different. While the 2009 upfront did offer lower volume, it was down about 12.5% to about 14.7 billion. Interestingly, by the way, that year, it's similar to what eMarketer just recently estimated the upfront's going to be this year for next season. Anyway, it was down that 12.5% versus the 2008 upfront market. This was according to Media Dynamics, the numbers I gave you. And of course, there was also lower CPMs. The difference is that the mechanics of the upfront selling market inventory during that June-August period continued. This time, everything's up in the air. We have marketers that have been hesitant to make any moves. We have others who have postponed in-season second and third quarter inventory and moved that along to a period where they think perhaps the business and the marketplace would be revived. So here we are in June, late June, early July. Any upfront deals yet? Anyone? So if there are, we want to hear about them, but we don't think so. There's a lot more questions, like I said. So forget about budget registration with TV networks at the moment. Clients and media agencies are trying to figure out right now where the business is, not 3 or 6 months from now. Who can make realistic projections? We've seen calls for big changes, including moving the process to a calendar year timetable, as you always reference, as well as more transparency. The ANA board recently called the former an immediate priority. Are big brand marketers now, do you believe, really in the driver's seat at the time to make sure that'll happen? Will TV networks continue to set, for the most part, the terms and conditions of how they sell their still prized inventory, according to many? Okay, now, my panelists, if you're around, turn on your video, turn on your audio. I'm going to introduce you. We have Maureen Bosetti, Chief Investment Officer, Initiative. Gibbs Haljun, Managing Director, Media Investment of GroupM. Jason Kanefsky, Chief Investment Officer, Havas Media, excuse me. Cara Lewis, Executive Vice President, Video Investment, Amplify US, Dentsu, Aegis Network, and Cathy, Shaffner, Chief Investment Officer of Empower. Okay, hope we're all here in part. Okay, so also I want to let you know, near the end of the discussion, we're going to take a lot of questions via the chat request you can see on your Zoom thing. We ask you that you please identify yourself and your organization with that question if possible. And let's start. Okay, Maureen, I'll go to you first, and then I'm going to go around the room a little bit and ask questions regarding where we are right now. This is the end of June, where, like I said, much upfront deal making would have been well along, if not closed. So can you give us an idea where we are or where you are with your clients right now?
Yeah, hi, Wayne. I would say in general, we've done a lot of strategy sessions over the last 6 to 8 weeks, having a lot of conversations, really trying to understand the business impact that's happened with COVID. And I would say we're in an assessment mode of understanding what the needs are for the clients, the budgets, and really game planning on both fourth quarter and beyond. So I would say in general, we're kind of in that stage of still trying to gather information, assessing, responding to clients' needs, and doing everything we can, that's in the best interest of our clients and what the needs are for both the short term and the long term. I think we're trying to balance both of those different marketplaces and understanding again what the needs are imminently versus what we were doing in 2021. So kind of in general, that's about where we're at.
Okay. Gibbs, can you give us
I mean,
assessment?
I would agree with Maureen in terms of, sort of the assessment and looking at it. I think, with the, one of the benefits of the current situation is that it's allowed us to be more thoughtful and more proactive versus reactionary, because there's not this need to like, oh, you got to move now, you got to go now. So there's a lot more of sort of thoughtful conversations and more developing more insights and more options as we look at sort of what's going on in the broader landscape.
Cara, where do you see things?
I agree. I mean, I think we are trying to just be thoughtful and trying to make sure that when clients are ready, we're ready, but at the same time, strategizing and making sure that we're placing the dollars in the right place. I think we don't want to just do things to do things and do them like we've done before, but we really want to continue to change how we invest and the timeline against it. And I think it's really important. But yeah, I agree with where really Maureen and Gibbs have said to this point where we are. We're talking to the clients on a daily basis. We're talking to the vendors just to make sure we're getting ourselves in a good position to be set when we are ready, and we'll be ready at different times.
Jason, where do you see things?
So we're done. I know, I'm kidding. We're not done.
That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear.
Right. I think the reality is that, clients, there are some clients who, obviously have not bought fourth quarter yet as part of their, 2020 planning. And there is definitely going to be an advantage for clients who can get their fourth quarter 2020 money set as it relates to 2021. So we are encouraging clients who can make a commitment in fourth quarter 2020 and able to leverage that money against 21 to get ready to go. Clients who are looking for more flexibility and different types of terms or have less confidence in the fourth quarter number, we're looking for different options. But the idea of, a one size fits all A&A decision on how we should invest our money, to be honest, is not how we see our clients' needs. And that's not how we're going to go. That's not how we're going to operate.
And Cathy.
Yeah, so similar to what everyone else is saying, we're working closely with our clients to help them strategize how to move forward. I think what's been really important for our clients is to understand the connection between the way they're strategizing on their own business and then the way we're strategizing for how to go to market. And, just trying to connect those two, because they have to feel comfortable before they move forward that how we go to market is going to best meet their business needs. But as Maureen said, it is a very slow and methodical approach. We're taking a very thoughtful approach at it and just helping them understand that there is an option and an opportunity here to better connect their business needs to how this market evolves and how it changes. So no hurry on this end.
Hey, Gibbs, on the calendar year issue, A&A made it a priority. I mean, obviously among its board members signed off on that. Where do you see, and what value do you place on it? I mean, obviously we've had this for years. When people were buying cable networks initially, everyone went and did a lot of calendar year deals. Now everyone does it here and there. How important is it?
I mean, look, I think, we have a lot of clients that are part of the ANA, and I think that there is value from a trade organization standpoint. I think the interesting aspect of it is nobody forces anybody to buy at any one point in time. You don't have to participate in the broadcast upfront. You have lots of clients that buy calendar year, broadcast year, scatter opportunistically. There is no fast rule that says, buy broadcast upfront or buy calendar upfront. Like, clients invest when they're ready to invest. And while, historically the broadcast year has provided value to clients, some of that value is not great if they have no flexibility. So it really is about individuals and crafting strategies that work for each individual client versus all in on a broadcast year, all in on a calendar year, or some combination thereof. So, that's the one thing. Like, if you talk to all of our vendor partners, I mean, digital is really done on a calendar year versus a broadcast year anyways. And in a lot of cases, if you look at spending, there's more digital spending than there is, in the traditional linear. So that, like, it just sort of seems to be a disconnect in terms of all of these things, because none of us are forced to buy at, May or June. We buy when we think our clients are ready to buy and make those investments.
So Maureen, I guess from what we're hearing is, there is going to be sort of big change, pretty much the way the market is going to be set this year. Do you see that? I mean, do you see clients really coming to you and saying, yeah, we want better transparency, we want more flexibility. And in the past, the TV networks held all the cards. They kind of read the market when all you guys registered budgets. So do you see any real change there?
I do. I think, to what Gibbs was saying, I think it's the biggest thing is sort of how we transact and having flexibility. That is obviously key to how we will construct these deals moving forward and how much flexibility clients have. We all saw that the need for flexibility, and as in March, when many of us were asking for flexibility terms, and there's a lot of uncertainty with budgets, not only in fourth quarter, but certainly in 2021. So I think the construct of the deals is what's most important, regardless of the timing. If we do it in July or August or September, October, it's really about what are the deal terms and how do we construct deals that can shift us away from these. The upfront has a role, and we're not moving away necessarily from doing a long-term deal, but what are the terms that make it favorable and give clients the flexibility that they're looking for. And I do think we have a moment in time to make change in the way we construct some of these deals.
Cara, a lot of the networks have said, to the press and everyone, to us, that they are flexible. They're very flexible. They don't really go into a whole lot of details. Obviously, they're in a position, this time of year where they're not normally in. And that seems to be the one big variable. Are they sincere in their efforts? And, what evidence do you have that, apart from obviously when it came to shifting budgets out of the second quarter and the third quarter, do you see them committed to this?
I think that, like everyone else, there's just so many unknowns. And I think, yes, they're saying that they will be ready when our clients are ready or when we as an agency are ready. I think it's taking a lot of change on our end and our clients' end, but also on their end. If we aren't coming with 4 quarters and we're coming with 1 quarter, they have to change how they're looking at their whole house and their model to be able to come into what our needs are. And I think, like Maureen said, flexibility is key, and clients have needs against that. They have needs against transparency. And so we'll see, when we get into it. We're talking to them about all of these different terms so that we can get ahead of that. And we'll see when we get into it, when we actually register, how they are in terms of being ready and saying that they'll work with us. So, that's time will tell for that piece.
Jason, is anybody determine where pricing is at all in terms of, that's an issue that some people felt that perhaps they could take advantage of. They can postpone certain media to other quarters. Perhaps maybe they feel they could buy scatter at a cheaper price than the upfront. Can you give any estimation about where, at all, do you think pricing is now, or maybe for the upfront, whenever that happens?
So I think right now there's probably a disconnect between what agencies are expecting, certainly what clients are expecting, and what vendors are willing to offer. There is still a supply side dynamic, which is yet to be spoken about, is that, there's no programming. Sports is very much in the air. We're all hoping that, MLB can get going with spring training and make it into a season. But if they don't make it into a season, that does not, bode well for the NFL, because, they have a even more complicated set of circumstances that they need to deal with. So, we're talking a lot about flexibility. We're talking a lot about price, but the reality is we have no idea what supply is going to look like. Hollywood is still somewhat closed. So, as you look forward into 2021, we don't really know what it will be. And the idea of setting a price to something that you don't know what you're buying, again, seems somewhat comical as well. So it's a bit of a crapshoot, and I think there's certain clients who are just buying a commodity-based impression, and if that's the case, they should be able to go forward. But clients who are looking for a very specific audience or a very specific type of programming, they probably should wait, because if it's not going to exist, it's silly to buy something in advance of it.
I think to echo what Jason
I was just pausing, Gibbs.
I'm trying to get back into panel.
That's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, get Gibbs.
So,
come back to
you
around 140.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Now my daughter's printing something, so I can't even talk. So
That's
when
what I'm
you look
planning
at,
already.
sort of the marketplace, the supply side is very much in question. And, supply side, you're on a panel now.
Hello, panel.
On a supply side equation, it really comes up in, oh, great. Here we go.
Yeah, nice, very nice.
There you go. Thanks.
Good. Yeah.
You're welcome.
On welcome to live TV.
There's two of them. Where's the other one?
I don't know. Can I go back to my panel?
Yeah.
On the supply side of the equation, it's very much up in the air and very much a wild card in terms of what sports are going to be available, what's going to happen in the overall marketplace. And, to Jason's point, if you're looking at tonnage, excess frequency, excess sort of like non-working GRP would be better expressed across, the whole digital landscape. Is there an opportunity there where even then you can take options after, based on IAB terms, 14 days, things like that. You can build in different things from a plan standpoint to help offset some of this ambiguous nature of what we're heading from a marketplace.
Hey, Jason, I just, obviously back to you, you were interrupted there a little bit, but it seems as though you think that at least if the sports marketing guys, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA gets going to some extent, that perhaps then the upfront market kind of moves. I mean, obviously the sports deals are kind of different than the primetime non-sports upfront deals. But do you think there's a little more impetus in terms of maybe packaging upfront deals if the sports get going?
Yeah, you can make it look more attractive. You can put some lipstick on a pig in some cases. If you're packaging Sunday Night Football on NBC and you couple that with some TVD Prime, some USA that that's basically repeats as it is, you could package something together that client will bite on, because there's some value here, there's some price exposure here that you can eliminate, so you can make a deal worthwhile. But if you have nothing, if there's nothing leading the deal other than price, I don't think it's in anybody's best interest to just negotiate a price deal, because that fundamentally falls apart relatively quickly. So there needs to be something to buy.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to shift here a little bit because we have a question coming in chat wise. They want to ask the panelists, and we'll this is the topic of the day here, their point of view as it comes to the Facebook ad boycott and what they might think about that. Anyone want to take that?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to give my 2 cents, which is there's not we don't have a public statement per se as IPG media brands about the boycott, but each client, there's a number of clients obviously that have come forward, and so they're not only boycotting Facebook, but obviously boycotting other social channels as well until they really see and make sure that the platforms are promoting content that they want to be aligned with. So we've also shifted the conversation from what we're calling brand safety to brand responsibility. So we released these 10 media principles, and how do we really get our clients to start aligning around these 10 media principles? And as a brand, what kind of responsibility do we have in terms of putting forth content that we deem suitable? So, I think we're going to see mounting pressure on Facebook. I think it's working. They've came forward Friday night with some changes. It probably hasn't gone far enough, but I would say that there's certainly clients are coming forward, and again, we are having individual ongoing discussions that obviously what's public is public, but I would say we're just trying to shift the conversation to this idea of brand responsibility and make some change, and that's kind of what we're, again, sort of publicly stating.
Cathy,
I
what
would
do you-
also comment that, it's somewhat of an extension of what we already do on sort of linear platforms, whether it is, issues with Fox News or CNN coverage, and that it's more about, eliminating, sort of, I don't want to say hate speech, but really eliminating, sort of be more responsible about what is actually reported to facts versus just being platforms to state opinions.
Yeah, and I would say, at Empower, we've been doing the same thing as Maureen said, we're helping guide that conversation for our brands. Our clients want to know, what they can do in any space, not just the social space, to be a good, social responsible partner. And we've been helping them think about that, whether it be digital, linear space, or social, and have also issued some key principles for them to follow so they can be a socially responsible brand.
Cara?
Yeah, I think we're talking to our clients about it, and there are clients that are being public about it. We are not putting anything out publicly, but we, are supporting and trying to figure out how to make the space better. And we can only do that as an industry together because we all have to come together. It's all a topic that is important to all of us and all of our clients. So I think together we have to do it. It can't be just done alone.
Gibbs, here's a question for you. You referred to excess frequency better expressed across digital. I don't know if there's excess frequency, but do you see a value in over-the-air networks, and how would you best utilize that?
Yeah, I mean, there is value in all media types with all value in that, you broadcast over the air, all provide value. And when you build plans and the tools we utilize to develop those plans, all take those into consideration. But, at some point you run into frequency issues where it's great that I'm getting more GRPs, but those GRPs are just adding excess frequency. Do I really need to hit people 10 or 11 times, or do I suffice at 8 or 9? And so, when you build portfolios, there's, obviously a reach curve. Cable builds more effect. Cable daytime are the first ones to come in. Then at certain frequency levels, you start then adding other things to get incremental reach. So it's a whole plan to build all of those things. So I'm not picking on one versus the other, but I do think, when you look at sort of effective reach, effective frequencies, do you need to have 1,000 GRPs or 900 GRPs going to be sufficient? And if 900 GRPs are sufficient, then let's put those GRPs in other areas. In some cases, we're all held hostage by market mix analysis where it's, projecting out sales based on a certain GRP threshold, regardless of whether those GRPs are actually being effective or not. And so we're trying to push to make them more effective, and therefore you don't need 1,000 make those sales goals. You only need 900. And then what else can you do with those investment dollars?
Jason, a lot has been talked about connected TV over the last several months, especially the ad-supported streaming platforms. But there comes some issues with connected TV on many different fronts. Where do you see that playing into your clients' upfront buying, if any, as it goes forward the rest of the year?
So I think the biggest issue that we have with connected TV, and there's some improvements being made, and I think Roku has made some announcements in that regard, is there's still an unbelievable lack of transparency about where the ads are actually running. And until if you think about transparency on television stations, you buy a spot in 60 minutes, you're going to run 60 minutes. You buy you run a rotator on Comedy Central or something, or USA. You have a sense of what your programming will be, but at least you know what network you're on. We need to get that kind of transparency from the connected TV OTT space, because without it, we're not actually learning anything about what our consumers are engaged in. We're allowing a black box or another company to determine outcomes for us based on their data, but we're not learning anything that we can take forward and implement in other areas. So I think that it's not a test and learn. I mean, with 2-3 years ago, it was a test and learn system. We know it works. We know there's a value to it, but I think the price point is wrong. I think the price point is too high as it relates to other media. And I think that, negotiating on people 2+ is insane. And there's lots of work that has to be done in terms of 15-second ads versus 30-second ads. And they need to grow up. This business needs to grow up fast because it's a multi-million-dollar business and it's acting like a 10-cent business. And that's not a fair way to transact.
How would you evaluate Amazon Fire TV in the same regard?
So I say Amazon is a little bit better off. We have better deal terms possibly with Amazon. I know my team is probably on this call who's cringing, but that's what they do whenever I'm on a panel. But I think we have better deal terms. Look, one just came in, cringed. Sorry, Diana. I think our deal terms are a little bit better there. Deal terms with Hulu are a little bit better. Freewheel, as you mentioned before, is one of the, I think Joe mentioned it, is a very trusted supplier, and that is very, very true, as is Gamut. So I think that there's work to be done. I think there are blueprints available for them to follow, and they need to get there. And I don't want to turn what is basically a video business into a digital business from the 1990s, where there was no transparency, and rate cards were just set indiscriminately to value.
Maureen, in that regard to transparency, one of the things that the ANA came up with in addition to calling for calendar year upfronts is better transparency. They didn't go into a whole lot of details when it comes to what they, I guess, want from the media, specifically the TV networks. Where do you think there needs to be better transparency from TV networks going forward?
Well, I think potentially around, pricing could be one thing. Maybe there's greater transparency needs around their pricing models and how we can influence that. I think on the audience buying side, how do we get to a place where we can transact? I think the audience buying has had some fits and starts, and there's some positives, negatives around how they do the audience buying, and more transparency around how that's priced potentially. Obviously TV, for the most part has been regarded as transparent. To Jason's point, you know exactly where you're running, you know where your spots are airing. But I think as we create these new buying models, especially around as they employ digital or OTT, really making sure that there's a high degree of transparency in cross-channel media for sure. We need to improve transparency levels there. And again, I think around audience buying and measurement cross-screen as well. Those are just some key areas I would highlight from a network standpoint.
Yeah, I would just say onto that, Wayne, if I might, and just say that, I think the key is, and I agree with everyone on all the different changes that have to be, happen. But I think the key is going to be taking advantage of this catalyst we've been given to create the change. Because we've been talking for some time now about, addressing the needs for concerns over ad placement or, data privacy or ad fraud. But we've made very little movement. I think the key, whether it be this or even in the linear space with how we change the terms of the deal, is going to be our industry accepting this catalyst that's been given to us so that we can make those change everywhere. And I think that's what's going to be the focus to determine how we move forward.
Cara, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I don't think that we can continue to just allow the basics of like our contract terms to be what they are moving forward. I think, clients are asking for flexibility, transparency behind where they're landing. It's more important because consumers want it personalized. So we don't want to land where our consumer and our data is showing us that our consumer is. Like, we have data in-house with M1. We know where our consumer is. We want to be where that consumer is. So tell us on the back end that we actually were reaching that consumer, and give us the data to help us actually analyze that on our own instead of you analyzing that for us. I think bring us in as part of the story instead of just telling us this is what it is. And I think the audience-based platforms in terms of the linear partners for sure is, they come back and they sell you're landing on X, Y, and Z network. And in some cases it's on networks that we don't really buy a ton of inventory on currently. So that always seems very interesting to me that all of a sudden these networks are popping. Meanwhile, the data we have isn't really saying that they are. So I think just having more transparency is important. We want to all do the right thing for the clients. So let's just be in it together to be more transparent.
Gibbs, a lot of the networks have made a big deal about being very integrated with all their media platforms, even before, we had concerns with COVID-19, the economy, and other issues. Have they been largely, at least incrementally moving, in a better way when it comes to, whether it's NBC with their one platform or other big media companies? How do you look at them, going into, well, any marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are certainly less bullish. I think that, if you were talking about this on February, it was far more, oh, this is what we're going to do and everybody's going to do it and you're not going to have a choice. And now it's like, well, we'd like you to participate. They're more flexible. They're more creative and they understand the need to provide more value. So it's not as forced as it might have been, if you were talking about an upfront marketplace and like double-digit increases. So, it is definitely swinging to more of a buyer-friendly scenario. And as a result, there are more options. But, I think what is interesting in all of this is that, we are still trying to work through all of the different scenarios and the solutions. And, it's not about one size fits all for everybody. It's about what's going to work for individual clients. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to navigate, because what works for client A may not work for client B on both a network standpoint, but also in a total market standpoint. So we're continuing to move forward with all of those. And it seems that most of our partners are more open to that. So, oh, you know what, one platform may not work for, A, but, we'll test it with B and C and D or do something along those lines. Same thing with Vantage in terms of how that is, potentially expanding, or even something as, getting more open along the world with Open AP. Like expanding those options is not, terrible from a marketplace standpoint. But I do think that, to sort of Cara's point, we all have our own data. And in some cases, it's about using our data against the platform versus using their data against it. Because, we need to look at it holistically across what's happening in the entire ecosystem. So not just, doing something on one partner, but doing it across all partners and understanding the duplication and frequency. And, whether I'm hitting the same person 8 times or hitting 8 different people is far more important across the board.
Are they better in terms of incorporating their third-party data with, all their metrics, or is that something they leave up to you?
I mean, I think they're better about it, but I think, again, it's the quality of the data. Just because they have data doesn't mean that their data is better than my data. And, that becomes really sort of tricky. Like, I don't know, I don't know that their black box optimization will yield a better result than our open evaluation.
Got it. Jason, last year, we talked a lot about advertising loads and promises that are made when it comes to that they were going to cut, deal with this issue of clutter. It seems as though, early in March, obviously due to circumstances beyond their control, COVID-19, they seemed to cut inventory, but not for the reasons maybe they wanted to, Gibbs' point, give everyone more value. How big of an issue is that going forward? Or is that something that we don't have to deal with because we're just in this other kind of limbo stage?
The good news is that the clutter issue has been resolved. We did a study, I think in early April, in May, I think it ran through May 9th was the end of the study. And, clutter was down like 17% or 20%, some crazy number versus the year prior. So I think that problem has gone away. But to be honest, I think clutter is on us as well as agencies. We create clutter, and a lot of it goes back to what Gibbs was saying, is that we're buying too many points, right? We sit there and we believe we need 1,000 points for reasons that aren't necessarily true. So we go out and buy 1,000 points, we inflate the marketplace, and next thing you know, we create clutter because we don't want to pay anything more than a plus X. So either our clients are willing to accept a higher price for less clutter, or we have to go look at other mediums and say, you know what, we're going to build our reach or incremental reach in other places, which is what we should be doing. And I think, you know, smart clients have done that. They've looked at their GRPs and said, okay, I'm going to tap out and I'm going to move forward. And I think more clients need to think about it that way as well. You know, clutter will be something that will continue as supply continues to erode. That's, you know, that's not going away. No matter how much we bitch and moan about it, I don't think that's a solvable issue. But I think just the last point that we were making before about data, you know, what we don't want to become is be part of a yield optimization curve for the networks. And I think Cara pointed out, or somebody mentioned that we end up in places that we never would have considered. And that's not because the data goes there. It's the optimization it's yield optimization on the vendor side. So that's, you know, one of the reasons why we prefer to use our own data, make our own decisions, as opposed to using a networks platform to do it for us. It's our jobs. It is our jobs, it's the agency's jobs to find the nuggets, not somebody else's. And once if we give over that responsibility to the vendors, we actually don't need to exist. So that's my own, you know, my view on. I think that echoes everybody else. That's how we should be operating.
Cathy?
Yeah, you know, I agree with that. I think that we have to be very, very careful and that we are part of this conversation of how we move forward from a data-driven perspective. You know, we talked about the user experience and the responsibility of the networks to change the user experience, and not just in OTT, but even in linear. I mean, this is a perfect time to think about how we change the, you know, decades old traditional pods that we buy when you talk about clutter, and we go in and we just clutter up, you know, 4 and 5 minutes of ad breaks within programming. You know, how do we, you know, reinvent what that user experience becomes like in the linear space, and use data to be able to do better targeting in that manner? And how do we get the networks to focus on creating that user experience that's going to make a more engaged audience receive our message?
Cara, last year, Michael had a interesting perspective, you know, when it comes to all this, that there were promises made and, you know, some networks didn't keep them. Hopefully things will be different, at least for media buyers' perspective. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the more we talk about it, constantly with our partners and push them, I think the more they're listening. But I agree with what everyone's really saying is, like, we have to push them that we need access to the data because we have the data. And if we aren't pushing our clients and telling our clients where to be, then we shouldn't exist. And we absolutely do exist for a reason. And I think that, you know, just pushing them to be open with us and transparent, as well as that transparency then pours out into what we can give to our clients, is just important, because we need to have the communication that, you know, yes, it's about price, but it's also about the consumer and what the consumer wants to see, when they want to see it, where they want to see it. And, you know, is it the right message at the right time, along with just all of the support data that we have behind it.
Maureen, a couple of questions from our audience. Are they surprised that the national TV ad market fell 36% in May? And do they think it's coming across the board, or some categories in particular more than others?
Yeah, not surprised. Nope, at all. Given a lot of the cancellations that came from QSRs, travel, auto, retail. I mean, at the height of COVID, there were just a lot of clients that needed to cancel. So that does not surprise me. Also, there was money that was shifted, so that could account for shifting that happened from second into third quarter. But not surprised, and those were some of the key categories that I would highlight from where we saw cancellations. And we think some of that, you know, there'll be lingering impact, obviously, into fourth quarter and beyond from those key categories.
Gibbs, another question. Do you see more advertising dollars shifting from linear TV to OTT this year? Do you see more dollars shifting from national OTT to local OTT?
Look, I think that there will be an increase in OTT across the board, connected TV, but I think it goes back to some of the things we've been talking about. You know, local is an option, but I think most of it would go against national platforms. But I think it's about the scale, the reach, the penetration, what those OTT platforms deliver, as well as sort of the transparency and where you're running in that. You know, I think the dirty little secret about OTT is that, you know, there are lots of different platforms that serve onto different publishers. So, you know, you buy Pluto, you have Roku serves ads into Pluto, Amazon Fire serves ads into Pluto, you know, Amazon and Roku both serve ads into Tubi. So it's not like, you know, you're sort of managing that. And then how do you deal with, you know, even something as broad as Hulu, where ABC runs ads in Hulu, NBC runs ads in Hulu, Fox runs ads in Hulu, I buy ads in Hulu, like, you know, having one platform that could actually manage frequency across all of those things would be great, but it sort of is a unicorn at this point. But again, it's trying to manage all of those different elements to make sure from a consumer standpoint, you're not hitting the same consumer 15 different times because you bought 15 different sites, but they're all serving on the same platforms.
Jason, would agency, this is also from our audience, would agencies ever return to client-by-client pricing discussions rather than one agency number?
I don't think I mean, we don't return to that. We do that all the time.
Okay.
I don't, you know, that's, I mean, our agency has never operated under the premise that there's one number for the shop. You know, there's a goal for the shop that we like to, you know, we like to be at in terms of inflation, but you know, there's certain things that happen during the course of a negotiation. There's certain clients, you know, if a client has a higher base, they should have a lower inflation number. It makes no sense. Well, you know, if you're paying $5 or something and that inflates by 5 points, that's 25%, that's 25 cents of inflation. If you're paying $6 or something, that goes up 30 cents. That's fundamentally unfair. So, you know, we don't look at it and say, you know, every client should have the same rate of inflation. Every client should have a fair rate. And if that means that one client is going to pay a lower rate of inflation, so be it. But I don't think the idea of a market price affects every client is the answer. I think that's, you know, that's a little bit about the transparency of the negotiations that we have with our clients. You know, listen, you know, you may be paying a higher rate than another person in the shop, or a lower rate than somebody in the shop, and here's why. So I don't know how other agencies operate, but that's always been our model.
Cathy,
Individual negotiations.
Sure. Cathy, another question from our audience. Is there more openness today to new video partners that tick all the boxes: flexibility, safety, transparency, and mass scale?
Yes, I do believe that the openness to switch to other partners that offer all those things is, it's going to be key moving forward. You know, we have this saying that we've been saying, price is key, but it's not king. You know, what is going to be super important is going to be this flexibility, transparency, safety, mass scale. And if they can find it somewhere else, then brands will move and find it somewhere else. So yes, it's going to have a lot more openness, and it's going to happen.
Okay. Cara, what do you make of A&E's network's plans to commit some of its national inventory, I assume it was national inventory, to addressable platforms from the major cable companies like Comcast, Charter, and Cox?
I mean, I think it's a smart move. We need to get more addressable and more audience driven. As we said, we have data. So I do think, you know, getting to a more addressable place, I think most of the networks are starting to see and build platforms in order to get their inventory to be more addressable. So I know it's definitely interesting in how it will work. And, you know, testing out those opportunities is definitely something that we're on behalf of our clients.
Okay. Can you give me, because any of you give me an indication about where scatter pricing is at the moment, if there's a way to sort of determine that? Gibbs, is there any, you know, near term, if you were out and needed to buy clients, you know, a 3-week schedule tomorrow, where you get the sense of where pricing is in relation to Upfront?
Yeah, I mean, I think pricing is dependent upon lots of different factors. So where is the historical price point? What is the base?
Right.
But, you know, the thing about, you know, even when you look at, you know, SMI data and everything else, the missing part of that equation is where supply is. And supply or lack thereof is, you know, 50% of what's driving, you know, sort of the marketplace. So it's not just demand, but it's also the supply equation. So no baseball, limited soccer at this point, you know, what happens, you know, no NBA, obviously that's coming back, but that has a huge impact on supply. And then you have a reduction in originals in third quarter that all got pushed to fourth quarter is also pushing, pricing up. I think, the market is somewhat mixed in that, if you're looking at cable news with the ratings up and a lot of supply, different price point than if you're looking at network prime time with not a lot of content, original content on the air at the moment, driving, year-on-year declines from an audience standpoint. So it is somewhat of a mixed bag, and that it really depends on both, all sort of elements of that to move forward.
Maureen, has the networks have any indication, and we ask for this reading constantly from them, and one of the key areas, it seems, in terms of TV production going into, say, starting in January, or even in September, we hear they have a pretty decent, level of fresh programming out there, maybe borrowed from other places. Do you have a sense of where they are in terms of, what we might see starting in September?
Yeah, I mean, based on the conversations that we had, they were all, they're hopeful that they can go into production. They would hope that they can go into production sometime in July or August. They would have content ready. Obviously, I don't have all the production schedules. I don't know all the latest and greatest, but obviously they're all working on scripts and figuring out ways to shoot in the most efficient way that they could get content up and running by, I would say, I don't see how they can get it up to by October, maybe by October, early October, if that's possible, but they're all obviously optimistic that that can happen. I think otherwise they're pushing some shows that they had planned for mid-season or summer. They're going to push that later or see what other acquisitions they can have in order to have new content by the fall. So I think more to come on that in the coming weeks, but obviously there's some level of optimism that they will have the content for the fall.
Okay, well, we'll be looking out for that for sure. Okay, well, that's about all the time we have. I want to thank all my panelists. They did a great job. Obviously, maybe next year we can meet all together at the same time in the same place for breakfast somewhere. So that would be helpful. And now I'm going to toss it back to John Whitfield.